The United States and Israel have stepped up their attacks on Iran as U.S. President Donald Trump's threats escalate. Trump is vowing major consequences if Iran does not reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Posting to social media this morning, a whole civilization will die tonight if the strait is not opened by his deadline of 8 p.m. Eastern Time. As we get closer to that deadline, there are reports the Prime Minister of Pakistan, acting as an intermediary, has requested Trump extend the deadline by 2 weeks. For more, I'm joined by Payam Akhavan, professor and human rights chair at Massey College with the University of Toronto and a former UN prosecutor. You're also originally from Iran, and I wonder how you reacted when you saw those words from the president.
Well, Catherine, there are a lot of outrageous statements in social media, but when it comes from the President of the United States, the commander-in-chief of the most powerful armed forces in the world, it is particularly disturbing. And the point is that this military intervention initially began in the name of liberating the people of Iran, and now it's calling for their destruction, for the destruction of their civilization. Some days earlier, President Trump had talked about bombing Iranians into the Stone Age. His Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, speaks about the stupid rules of engagement. And those rules of engagement, which are based on the Geneva Conventions of 1949, international humanitarian law, are there to ensure respect for the principle of distinction between military targets on the one hand and civilians and civilian objects on the other. So I would even say that calling for the destruction of civilian infrastructure, calling for the destruction of a civilization, could amount to instigation of war crimes. It's the job of the commander-in-chief to ensure that the armed forces comply with international humanitarian law. And if I may say that beyond the legal question, what is this going to do to the legitimacy and influence of the United States on the global stage? This is catastrophic for the long-term ability of the United States to lead on the world stage. And finally, what this has done, instead of emancipating the people of Iran, it has pushed them into the arms of the tyrannical regime that they want to get rid of. In January, tens of thousands of peaceful protesters were exterminated on the streets of Iran. We witnessed the horrific images of mothers and fathers looking for their children in black body bags in morgues. There was this incredible outrage against the Islamic Republic. But now those same people are being pushed into the arms of the Islamic Republic because the United States is calling for the destruction of their civilization. So this is not just unlawful and unethical, it is downright foolish.
There was so much in there, Payam Akhavan, and so I want to go back to one of your points, which is you said the words themselves, the social media statements, in your view, may ultimately, if we were to look at what international law says, may amount to the instigation of war crimes, that just the words themselves could be a crime?
Well, indeed, if you are the commander-in-chief and you are, in effect, encouraging your armed forces to indiscriminately attack civilian objects, that could amount to instigation. And in fact, you're exposing your own armed forces to legal liability, because international humanitarian law is also part of the laws of the United States, as it is here part of the laws of Canada. And superior orders, we know from the Nuremberg Tribunal after the Second World War, the trials of the Nazi leaders, as superior orders are not a defense where an order is manifestly unlawful. So in that sense, I think we need to take very seriously that even if this is meant to be bluster or bravado, intended to intimidate the Islamic Republic into submission, that it carries legal consequences.
Do you imagine, and it is of course so difficult to say at this moment because we don't know what's going to happen when we reach that 8 p.m. deadline, but if we were to talk of only the words here, do you imagine that Donald Trump would ever face consequences for those claims that he's been making?
Well, it's a very good question, Catherine. The rule of law is not doing very well these days. I don't think I need to tell you that, including in the United States, where we have witnessed a dismantling of constitutional safeguards, and it is quite a challenge to ensure accountability, even for brazen violations of U.S. law, let alone for committing war crimes against people in a country halfway across the world. So this is really a very difficult, challenging moment for the rule of international law or the rule of law in general, as we witness the rise of authoritarianism and hateful populism. But that should not deter us from speaking truth to power. We have to speak about justice. We have to speak about what is right and wrong. And as I said, for the people of Iran, they're now the victims both of the Islamic Republic, which has massacred innocent people on the streets of Iran, and now they're the victims of foreign powers who speak the language of emancipating them from tyranny, but who are in fact now crossing the line into indiscriminate bombardment of civilian infrastructure. How do you liberate a people by denying them drinking water, by destroying their hospitals and their roads, and denying them electricity and food and what have you? So I think if this is about winning hearts and minds, well, certainly this is not going to succeed.
I will tell you, Payam Akhavan, news breaking just right now, Donald Trump saying this will be a double-sided ceasefire. I agree to suspend bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. So this is just breaking news right now that Donald Trump has agreed to this ceasefire. I wonder what your reaction is, as we are all just learning this at the same time.
Well, it's interesting because just a few seconds ago, I told you that perhaps this is bluster and bravado, so that he can intimidate the Islamic Republic, or at least declare this as a victory, to say, look, I was the tough guy, I threatened them, they backed down, I'm the victor. And perhaps this is his off-ramp, his graceful exit from a never-ending war. But that does not change anything that I have said, that it is unacceptable for the President of the United States, for the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, to be speaking about wiping out a civilization. It is illegal, it is unethical, it is unwise, and it is counterproductive. And the people of Iran are not going to forget what has been said.
I'm going to just give you the latest information as we know it before I ask you one closing question, Payam Akhavan, about this moment. Donald Trump is saying, according to the news wires right now, we received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. Almost all various points of past contention have been agreed to between the United States and Iran. A 2-week period will allow the agreement to be finalized and consummated. We are very far along with the definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran. Again, a fast-moving situation. You made the point before about the question of the extent to which this was bluster. What would your thought be if indeed we have sort of come back from the brink today, about your hope going forward for, yes, the people of Iran, but also how the world tries to prevent us from getting this close to the brink again?
Well, I'm certainly relieved that at 8 p.m. we're not going to witness the carpet bombing of the city of my birth, Tehran. But what I'm concerned about is not just the ceasefire, but what happens next. One of the problems here is, getting back to what I said earlier, the people of Iran have been the victims of massacres by a ruthless regime and bombardment by foreign powers. Who is the biggest enemy of the Islamic Republic? It is the people of Iran, who want a secular, democratic state, who want to be part of the community of nations, rather than paying the price for a hateful ideology that has created so many enemies for Iran. What I'm afraid of now is that following a ceasefire, there will be revenge killings against the Iranian people. And under cover of the war, we've already seen numerous executions of political dissidents or simply of young people who were participating in the protests. And my fear is that those executions will now escalate. So a ceasefire is certainly a good thing, but there are long-term problems which have to be addressed, namely the democratic transformation of Iran by the Iranian people. And then there's the wider question of what sort of leadership we have at a time when the international rule of law has become imperiled. This sort of gangster gunboat diplomacy is not sustainable in the long run. So we need to perhaps use these crises as an opportunity to reimagine the United Nations, to strengthen multilateralism, rather than to despair and accept this as a reality.
On that note specifically, what would you call upon Canada's Prime Minister to do at this moment?
Well, once upon a time, Canada exercised global leadership. We talked about human security, peacekeeping, the responsibility to protect. And I think Canada could be doing much more at what is a really critical historical juncture when we see, on the one hand, the disintegration of a world order which was already deficient. So we talk about a new world order, but what does that mean? How do we have to reimagine the United Nations, multilateralism, the calculation of the national interest? So I would hope, as I said earlier, that these crises would be seen by our government as an opportunity to step forward and to do much more to reimagine the world.
Payam Akhavan, very grateful to have your insights as we learn this breaking news about this 2-week ceasefire. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Catherine.
Payam Akhavan is professor and human rights chair at Massey College with the University of Toronto.